Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Bree.
And we have a guest with us today. We are so excited to share with you. We have author Marcella Bell. Marcella, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be doing this with you guys today.
We are super excited to have you here with us. We've established that before we hit the record button. We've gone over that quite a bit. So yes, very excited. How has your 2022 been so far?
I just had a baby a month ago. So
congratulations.
My third child, welcome. So most of it has been gestational. I will say that, but now things are really starting to kind of pick up and move again now, and it really reflects that I was growing a human, and now that human is out in the world, and the energy is freed up, and the human is here, and we're adjusting, and it's a lot, but it's really beautiful too, and also writing in amongst all of that. So
wow,
yeah. Congratulations!
Thank you.
Well, are you ready to get into some icebreakers?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
Okay, I had to think about it. This is really great. So I would say my warning label is contents may surprise you. And that could go on me or on any of my books.
What was your first job?
I worked at the Oregon Zoo. And,
oh, no kidding.
And the Oregon Zoo actually will hire you before you're 16. So I actually got my first tax-paying job when I was 14.
Wow.
And it was at the Oregon Zoo. I worked mostly when you work there that young, you're working in the food service part of it. So at the different carts and different restaurants that are on the zoo grounds. But it's a really beautiful place. And even on the food service side, you have these moments where you can actually have strange encounters with animals. So sometimes I would be working near where they did the birds of prey show. And one time a bird flew over me, a bird of prey, and pooped on my head. And so that was like this lifelong story of birds pooping on my head. But more fun stories as I was working in one of the more remote snack kiosks, and it was near a marmoset enclosure, and the marmoset came up to the window and put its hand on the window when it saw me, and so I got to put my hand on the window, and then we had this glass thing, and it was really beautiful. so it was a great first job, but I've been paying taxes since 14.
So cool.
Oh, that's super cool. Well, besides reading and writing, what was one of your teenage obsessions?
Anime, and I still am obsessed with anime, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here. When I was young and am obsessed with anime, we did not have streaming services, and so you really couldn't access a lot of anime. You really just had, I had Sailor Moon that they ran on actually regular TV when I was really little, but then later on Cartoon Network. So I was really into Toonami and all the anime that they offered, like in the afternoon and in the evening, later at night. And so and sometimes if I had saved up my pennies, I would go to Suncoast and buy something. But I started the anime club at my school.
Oh, that's so great!
Really into anime.
I mean, I'm thinking back to that. Am I correct in that, like, really Cartoon Network did it kind of introduce it to us?
It really did. So I think Sailor Moon was on regular cartoon, like regular network television, but then that was it. That was like it at all. And then Cartoon Network came out, and it reran Sailor Moon, it ran Dragon Ball Z, they did Gundam Wing, they just did the afternoon block, and later they just really, really brought it to American audiences. As accessibly, at least, because you could always go to the video store, you could buy it, but it was not easy to get for a really long time.
Yeah, very limited selection too.
Yeah. And not all of it appropriate for kids.
Oh, yeah.
That is very true. I just remember having a conversation with my sister recently. Like, she pointed it out to me. She's like, Cartoon Network is really new when you think about it. And I was like, wow, yeah, it is. Like, Nickelodeon was obviously always around, but I remember Cartoon Network becoming a thing and it introducing cartoons that didn't look like the other cartoons, and that's what it was.
Yeah, it really, really cool. Was that. That's you're right there with it. Remembering it.
Well, so I have to ask: Are you watching Spy X Family?
So not right now. Right now, because I missed so many things, and because my older kids are actually just at the age where they're getting into it, we're actually going back and doing a lot of the ones that I didn't get a chance to watch, either because they weren't available or because they came out and I thought it was too old. So we're actually watching Naruto right now, and we're like going all the way through Naruto
the whole way, huh?
the whole way, like all 7 gazillion episodes and movies. We are into it. But do you recommend it? We are always open to
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is so wonderful, especially if you're a romance fan. It's got the whole fake relationship, family thing going on, but like spy, espionage, comedy stuff. It's fantastic. It's one of the best in a while.
Oh, I will definitely check it out. You can hear in your voice how good it is.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
So next time Marcella Bell is on the podcast, she will be reviewing anime.
Absolutely.
Well, we read on your website that you're a registered yoga teacher. We'd love to hear about your yoga journey.
So I started practicing yoga when I was 19, because the first time I took a class was as a college sophomore. And I took it for the very kind of classic reasons of being like, oh, I'm stressed, and I'm sure I know that this is a thing that can help with stress. So I took it and instantly fell in love. Instantly, like immediately knew that this practice was for me and felt just like a homecoming. And even it was an interesting thing, because even from that first class, I actually knew I would become a teacher at some point in my life. But I also had this really beautifully comfortable sense that it wasn't going to be for a while and that I could take my time. And that's really something that yoga practice brought to me, is this sense of taking time and slowing down and kind of observing your own natural rhythm. And so I knew I was going to do it, but for the longest time, I just had a personal practice. And then around 30, actually, I had this urge and this knowing that it was the time to kind of take my practice deeper. I made some friends that they were further along in their practice than I was, and introduced me to the deeper and more holistic practice of yoga. So I knew yoga was beyond asana. I'd had enough of a knowledge to know that, but this friend of mine introduced me to a mantra practice, and also introduced me to a study practice, a reading practice. And through that, I read the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and reading those just took me so much deeper into my practice that I knew I was ready to go take that next step and take the teacher training program. And I did that. And what was really fascinating about yoga was in taking that step to deepen that practice and say yes to that, it very powerfully opened me up to saying yes to other things. So it actually ended up really directly impacting my writing and making me more serious about writing, more brave about going for writing. And so I really realized that they were kind of yoga, writing, and my family ended up becoming these kind of 3 legs of the stool of who I really was and what really mattered to me. And so they really helped me kind of strengthen each leg by going in and strengthening my yoga practice, and really inspired me to go after the things I was more passionate about career-wise. So I left the path that I was on and really dove into working in bookstores and really making my whole life about books, about writing, about reading, about the written word, about storytelling. And that led me to the bookstore that I ended up working at, which Macy Yates and Caitlin Cruz walked through the door of.
Because of course,
right? And so they walked through the door, and I've been reading romance since I was about 12, but I, at that point, had never tried to write a romance. So the writing that I was doing middle grade stories. I had done fantasy. I had participated here and there in little things. So years before this, I had done NaNoWriMo and done a project, and I finished. I was so proud that it was a fantasy project, and all these different projects that were not romance, because my writing journey is this just constant denial of writing, of what I want regarding writing. And so as I would say, like, oh, I could never write a romance. I love it too much, and I just could never do it. And then I met Macy and Caitlin, and we started through the bookstore. we started a romance book club. So then every month we're reading, and I'm talking to these women, and they're with their insight, with their knowledge from the inside, like from the publishing side of and the writing side of things, we're really turning romance into a seminar almost. And so by breaking it down, by focusing so much, by bringing it in so much, I was like, well, I think I'm going to have to try. And they were really huge mentors and encouraging, and just like their friendship was really a big drive to try and start. And so I was like, oh, what should I start with? And Macy was, of course, like, cowboys, do a cowboy, write a cowboy romance. And so I wrote the first draft of The Wildest Ride. And I finished that, and I was just hooked. I loved it so much that I wanted to do more. And right around that time, Presents was doing a blitz. And so I didn't want to write another cowboy right away. I wanted to dive right back into writing romance, though. This blitz happened. Macy and Caitlin write Presents. And so I was like, oh, obviously this is the next step. And the blitz submission that I did became Stolen to Wear His Crown. And it just like everything, like I just felt guided. And again, going all the way back to your original question about my yoga practice, it really was just taking these steps that then the next step became clear, and the next step became clear. And so I wrote the blitz. I got accepted to the blitz, because the Harlequin blitzes are kind of, you write your first few chapters and then you submit, and they if you win, you get to work with an editor to develop it, and then with the hopes of publishing it. So I got selected, and that was in late June that we found out. And it was right before the 2019 RWA. And it was like, I didn't have tickets. I wasn't planning to go. RWA was in July. So it was literally the next month. And I found out that the editor who had selected Stolen to Wear His Crown, what became that, she was going to be there. And I just knew that I needed to go, and I needed to meet Flo. And that was the one driving reason I went to RW. I was, I'm going to meet Flo, and we're gonna just meet in person. And so I went, and the only thing I had planned before was my meeting with Flo. We had tea in the morning because she was so busy. Her schedule was already totally booked and filled with everything that people who planned ahead of time were going to do. And then I went, and Macy and Caitlin and Jackie and Nicole were all there. So I got to go see them. And I'd met Jackie once because Jackie Ashenden. She'd visited Oregon to visit Macy and Caitlin. And so I'd gotten a chance to meet her. And I had not met Nicole Helm, who writes for Intrigue. And we all met, and it was really, really it was so neat to meet them in person and feel the energy with them of the kind of almost like a romance summer camp. Yeah. And so we were there. And then also they were all busy because they had all planned a schedule again. And so I had a bunch of time on my hands, and I went to some of the workshops. I went to some of the talks, and I was like, I guess I'll go to the agent speed dating session. I guess it's on a whim. I'll go. I do have a finished thing, so I'll go with that. So I went and met agents in the speed dating round. Again, signed up and wasn't signed up ahead of time. So just was penciled in name at the end. And through that, I ended up getting contacted by one of the agents I met. And through that, I ended up in multiple steps getting to my agent. And right around the time that I got the actual, so just before really getting the contract to officially write the whole Presents of Stolen to Wear His Crown, I also got an agent. And then shortly after getting my contract for Stolen to Wear His Crown, I sold The Wildest Ride. So it just all happened, just bam, 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 like hand of fate is operating. And then the pandemic started. And so, and that kind of, all of that brings us to here.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we can put that officially on the list of things you weren't expecting. So I was at work at a bookstore, and in walks Maisie Yates and Caitlin Cruz.
And the funniest thing was the meeting was actually not it was a romance meeting in itself, and it was very much an enemies to lovers initially. So not for me, but so they had come in once before, or I was there the first day they came in, and they came in and they were like, "Where's your romance section?" And the store had been opened by the woman who opened the store, who is she's literally like one of my very, very best friends in the whole world now. And her name is Eileen, and she was a doctor. And she did so much research and preparation before opening the store. And she had been advised not to carry mass markets, because she had been advised that they did not make enough money to carry on the shelf for a store her size. The store is 525 square feet, so it is a tiny little store. You walk in and you're in the whole store, just stepping in. It's so beautiful. It's got these big, huge doors open, so it has an open air feel. It's a wonderful place. But she had made that decision. And so I was hired, and we had just met at this time. And I had a lot of experience at bookstores, because I had worked at Barnes & Noble in Portland, and I had worked at another larger, more established indie in Southern Oregon. And so I just had more bookstore experience. So she was new opening the store, but had this beautiful vision. And then I had a lot more experience, and we just came together, and it was in itself a kismet meeting. And I was like, okay, well, I'm getting to know you. I'm going to play the long game here. We will eventually have romance, but I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to push it right away. But Macy and Caitlin walked in, and they're like, "Oh, I see that you're just another one of those indies that thinks you're too good for romance." And so that was the energy with which we met. And Eileen, being the person she is, so she was specifically an ER doctor, which I think matters, because she just has this ingrained urge and inclination to consult. And so they came in with this energy, and she was like so good at redirecting that into, she's like, no, you guys are right. I don't know. I haven't read a romance since The Wolf and the Dove. And she loved that, but it'd been years. She'd gone to medical school. She hadn't read one in a long time. She's like, so what do you guys recommend I carry? And so Macy and Caitlin sent lists. And then through that process, we started the book club. And the book club was intended to be this kind of, a lot of people don't read romance and don't think they read romance and have a lot of ideas about romance. So let's have this club. Let's create this space where we just face all that head on. And so we went from this contentious meeting in which I'm like protective of Eileen and just like not showing my cards, and then to starting this romance book club where we then are revealing our inner lives to each other and our deepest, because it's romance, you talk about fantasies, you talk about yourself, you bring yourself out. And so in this space, we just created this wonderful environment. And then that led me to that. But it was like full blown, like anime style daggers shooting from your eyes. Like just it was such a great meeting, but it was it's like the hand of fate. You can't look back and see that and not see the hand of fate involved.
That is so
really
cool.
Oh yeah.
That's so cool.
That's incredible. I'm about 3/4 of the way through Stolen to Wear His Crown. And as I was reading through it, I was just like, Marcella knew Presents before she even started this. Like, it's so clear. It's such a just great Presents story, especially with the soldiers storming in and chapter. Right? It's like, that's wonderful.
You're like, so one of the things we talked about a lot, and that Macy and Caitlin do for each other quite a bit, is one of the great things about Presents is oddly, so you have these expectations, and people will put so much on the idea of like, you get the same thing and people have expectations, and that is so true. But one of the things as an author in any category line that's really great is by being given a parameter, you then have this crazy space to work in. And so you're like, how over the top, how far can I go in the space of these parameters? And so that's what we talked about a lot. So like you'll get like, Caitlin has cult leaders and like crazy like amnesia and just on your forbidden stepbrothers, like all these things. You're like, how far can I take this? And so I initially, I hadn't been so aware of this. It was really kind of subconscious. And this is like another thing I love about romance. As a teen, I was kind of shy. I would use book covers and I'd be like, I'm not reading this. And my grandpa would be like, you and your smut. And I'm like, so I had this feeling, my beautiful aunt, who's just like such a hippie, free spirit person. She had one time was like, you should never be embarrassed. She's like, people complain about this, but it's actually really sophisticated because romance always reflects the culture that it is written in, the culture and the time and the constraints that particularly women are existing in, but also just like that's going on. So she's like, so it's very subversive actually. And she told me this a long, like when I was young, and I held on to it. And then meeting Megan and Caitlin Cruz is her pen name. So meeting the two of them, we really got to explore that a lot more. And I wasn't super conscious of it because the thing I was conscious about when writing Stolen to Wear His Crown was this, I had this driving urge, especially at that time, to write the same happy endings I love, but put people in them who I had seen or who were more like the people I had known, but to give them the happy ending because I love the happy ending. And I think every happy ending is believable when it's got the right setup, and every person can be in that happy ending, and no matter what kind of person they are. And so I was just really, really driven by this urge to give people happy endings that had not had them. And at the time of writing that, I mean, we were dealing with a lot of really heavy cultural issues. And it wasn't at the time I just did, but I actually, looking back, I was like, oh, that's such a reflection of both my anxiety at the time, because you had SWAT teams busting in and arresting and attacking Black people, and they didn't get happy endings in real life. Those stories didn't have happy endings. And it was interesting to see that now. You're like, oh, it's presents, it's light, it's silly, but it also does reflect the heavier things. So she does get ambushed by the SWAT team, and her ending is that she becomes queen. That SWAT team takes her from the ground to the crown. And so like that is, I was like, oh, that's so funny that so reflects like both the anxieties as well as the like imagination and drama and all the things that are in presents. And then, but I was able to just like see how much that reflected both of those things as just all of it all in once.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is
we definitely have to talk presents because Erin and I chat presents all the time, but let's backtrack a moment. So we typically ask origin stories here, but we did some snooping on your website and the Harlequin YouTube channel, and you shared on a video that you did that it was Say You Love Me by Johanna Lindsey. That was the first romance that you read cover to cover. You had tried to sneak and read one of your mom's romances before then, but this was the first one. So tell us about Say You Love Me, and what was it about it that was like, okay, I need more of this?
So I mean, ironically, it's very presentsy. Johanna Lindsey is just a very presentsy author in general. Like, so she wasn't writing presents, but she was writing those similar, just like, wait, this is unbelievable. But I can't get enough. And unbelievable in a way that you can't get enough of. So Say You Love Me opens up with a young aristocratic woman auctioning off her virginity because her family has fallen on dire straits, and she is certain that this is the only way that she can save them. And so she's like coming up, and this like innocent girl who's just good-hearted and just doing, I've got to save my family. So she comes up with this crazy scheme, and the hero of that story, he's been drugged to this event by his rapscallion cousin. So his cousin's like, I heard about this crazy thing, let's go. And he's like, I don't want to go to that. I don't like that. And he goes, but he goes, and he's like, I'm just here to make sure that my cousin doesn't get into any trouble. See, this young woman steps up, and he's like, I can't let this happen. And he steps in, and he bids on her. He bids on her to save her from the other people who are bidding on her, and he outbids all of them, driven by his heroic urge to protect her and stand up for her. And that starts off their journey. And he has no intention of following through on his bid, but of course they fall in love. So later it all happens, but it just, so it's the first thing. And I was just like, the setting and scene is just so outrageous. And but that it had a sweet and happy ending, and that he was so heroic and good. And then he was part of a family And so then that opened the gateway for a full glom where I was like, I have to read all of these books for this family. And then I read all of her books.
Wow.
And she has some really, she's a huge influence on me, to the point that Macy actually made me this mug that says, "What would Joanna Lindsay do?" And on the back, it's a heart full of things that are different tropes and different things.
I see kidnap on there.
So she does kidnap. She's kidnaps, alpha heroes, like exotic pets and locations, like all these things that you actually find in Presents all the time. Like these are all very, very common Presentsy things. And what was really funny is Macy was in secret making me this mug. But she asked, she's like, "So what are some of the things that you think you love about Joanna Lindsay?" And I had already made a list. So I was like, "Oh, it's funny you should ask." And I just took her a picture of this long list that I had written. And so these are also just the details from that list.
True friendship. That is
true friendship. No, and it was just so great. So she's such a, like, I can't say enough about Macy and Caitlin because they are such great mentors and just really supportive of people who want to do this, who want to go into this field, who want to achieve this dream. They just really follow them, get into them. They give great advice. They are just really on it. But because of Joanna Lindsay, like, it was falling in love with these fights. So one of the things on here is actually feisty heroines. And one of the things that she did in so many of her books that I love to this day is her heroines are fierce and brave, and they're the women who wear pants in the time when women aren't allowed to wear pants. They're the women who go do brave, daring, outrageous things because that they're driven to by their heart. They're passionate. They're full of fire and energy. And so I just, like, when it was my turn to kind of come to this writing practice, I, of course, was just so influenced by her. I was going to write heroines that were non-traditional, that were brave, that did not, that never bowed or shied away from these, like, incredibly domineering, powerful men that they encountered, and that these heroes were just like, she writes some heroes that are just like, she's got a lot of bully romances and just a lot of heroes where you're just like, this is out of control, mister. You just need to take that down a notch. And so she just, it's all of that. And so I just was so inspired, and I've read lots of other authors. I got really into romance just as a big fan. So went into contemporary, went into historical Western, like all of it, paranormal. I love it all. And so, but Joanna is this like, it's my, you always remember your first.
Yeah.
Like she's the one who influences me. So I would say she's the biggest influence on my work at all, because I tend to want, I want a hero that gives you the feeling that I got when I encountered a Joanna Lindsay hero, and I want a heroine that makes you feel that way too. And so that whenever I kind of start, it's always really like, it's almost like she's right there over my shoulder. And unfortunately, but in one of those, like, oh, of course, cosmically, they announced her death right after my first book deal. And it was this weird thing. So I think when I write, I also try to kind of say, I'm taking up your mantle. I'm sitting here and your spirit is with me. And that's not to not acknowledge the fact that she also was very of her time and did do a lot of things that we don't really like to see very much anymore. But I still just, she's just so my example and my mentor model. So
that's so cool.
Oh, that is great. Well, His Bride with Two Royal Secrets is part of the Pregnant Princess continuity. How did this series come to be?
So again, Macy. So this is Macy's idea because Jackie started writing for Presents right around the same time that I did. So hers came out just before mine. And so we suddenly found ourselves where Macy, Jackie, Caitlin, and I were all writing for Presents at the same time. And Macy, Jackie, Caitlin, and Nicole have a cowboy series that they do together. And I was just like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be so cool to do a series, like, and to write something with all your friends? And that's so cool. And so you
can't say something like that to Maisie Yates and her not be like, ding.
Exactly. And then she was like, all right, we're doing this. So she went to the editors and she's like, this is what I want to do. What do you guys think? And so the editors were like, we love that idea. Let's do it. And that's how it happened. It was just such a whirlwind too, because it was right. I had just, like, just gotten the contract to do to finish out the Queensguard trilogy. So I had it was just happening so fast, and so we just jumped right onto this too. And it was really neat. One of the things that was surprising about it was I was so like, I just like the optics of it were so exciting to me, of just like friends writing a series together. They are all much more experienced writers than I am, and they have been doing this for a lot longer. And one of the things that like rose up for me right away when we started was that I actually because I'm a lot farther behind them on the learning curve on like exactly how to craft and how to do it. And each time I still have a big lesson with each book that I write so far. I still have a big, oh, that's what I was doing there, and that was holding me back, or that was twisting me up. And so it was actually a lot harder than I anticipated it would be, because they write faster than I do, and they've all been writing for like over 10 years, and I was in my kind of first 2 years and really learning it all. And so when they're working on their stories, they're like, oh, here's a chapter, and I just couldn't keep up with that, and I couldn't keep up with them in the same way that I had hoped to. But they did, by the pressure and the challenge and the drive to kind of to do the best you can to keep up. I actually ended up feeling more satisfied with that book than even any of the others, because they just get a little better. You learn each time. But it was definitely hard, and I definitely found myself being like, whoa, I'm out of my league a little bit here.
Wow. I imagine doing a continuity in general has got to be intimidating, regardless of who you're working with. But if you're like the new author and everybody else has all these years and books under your belt, it's got to be like, oh my gosh, I am out of my league. But like when you sit back and think about it, it's like, what a wonderful opportunity to just learn, you know? That's incredible.
No, so I mean, I had this vision where we would be exchanging chapters, and it would just be so collaborative in the fact of like we were really in it. When it got to be my turn, I ended up just getting absorbed in it. So I actually only was able to even send them ahead of time a few chapters, but even that little bit, every single piece of advice that they gave, every bit of response ended up getting incorporated into the different rounds of revision, because they just know what they're doing. They're like, this start is maybe not the starting place. This maybe needs to increase the tension here. I don't understand why this motivation is happening. So why did they do this crazy thing? I think that needs to be elaborated or strengthened or drawn out more. And everything that they pointed out, again, they are experts. And so it was a lot of work. And then we were also moving at the time too. So this was around the same time that we're doing the big move. And so it was just, all I could do was put my nose to the grindstone and just work. But that influence and the pressure, all of it actually really did a lot to improve me as a writer. But it was not easy. It was one of those into the fire moments.
Yeah. Well, I have a random question that I don't want to forget before we move on. So how did working as a bookseller, I always find it fascinating when we have writers who were booksellers before. Did that influence your writing or how you approach romance at all?
Definitely. So, I mean, I still work with the bookstore. So even though we've moved, we still do a once a week call where we do all the ordering for the store. So I'm still ordering, which is really a lot of how it influences what you do, because you are so constantly aware of everything else that's coming out. You're very aware of like across genre, across everything, and you get to see the trends. You get to communicate. You know a lot more directly with readers. But coming into romance is a little different, because romance readers don't necessarily get their books in the same places and get their books necessarily in the same process that other genre readers do. So you have to do this balance of, you're like, I'm very aware and in tune with what's going on in the publishing industry, but I also need to remain in tune with my readers who are not published industry insiders, who are not they're not tuned into the same channels, and their interest and drives and what they're looking for does not necessarily get reflected in the same way that the general publishing trends or things are saying. So it's definitely this balance of being aware of what's out there, aware of what's going on, and then also being tapped into both myself as a reader and then other romance readers to see what's on the ground in their hearts and minds and things like that.
Okay.
But it's a great way. It's great to be exposed in the world all the time and to really be just inundated with books and to be kind of aware of also aware of what's selling. So I would say that it's a danger to try to write to anything that sells. Like I would never suggest anyone write to what they think is going to sell, because things change and the timelines don't line up. But I would say that it is useful to see, because I do get a little bit of a hint of trends that are coming around. I do get a little bit of a hint of things that are going out, maybe that are going down.
I know. I just want to be like, tell us what's going out, Marcella. Tell us what's going out.
Well, it's even that is delayed because it's still looking at what's coming out. But you'll see there's a lot of so actually really interestingly, and I don't know why this happens culturally other than I'm guessing collective consciousness. Though things come out in groups. So right now there's a ton of books, a ton of romances about bookstores or set in bookstores or with
I've
bookstores.
Noticed it. Yeah.
So you see those types of things coming down the line. So you'll see this crop of things with this subject are coming out. And then you see that kind of get saturated, and then you see that kind of start petering out. So I feel like for a while, so one thing that you're really not seeing very much of anymore is anything that really has to do with online dating or online life. Which was just there were a bunch of books where you'd have online dating featuring, or you have online kind of presence, or someone's a social media star, or some those kinds of things have kind of disappeared and trickled out. And now you're seeing this surge of bookstores and small towns and coming in more close relationships. And then you can kind of step back and see how that reflects the trends that are happening wider. As you saw that everybody's online, everyone's out, and then we all went into a pandemic, and suddenly everyone is not online and out in the same way because you can't be. And suddenly you see this rise in kind of hometown, small, close kind of stories and settings and environments and contexts. So it's those types of waves and trends that you kind of see come in and out. But TikTok has changed that too. So TikTok brought all these books that had been already out even, but just brought them back up to people's attention in a way where people hadn't, maybe they missed it, or they were never aware of that corner of the book world. And now suddenly it's everywhere. And so that's been an interesting thing to see how that also then comes in, because that's not from inside publishing, that's very much from outside publishing. But I do try not to let it guide too much. I still when I come back to it, I'm still just what would Joanna Lindsay do? What makes me excited and feel energized?
Marcella, when is the next Paranormal Peak coming?
No, that's what I wanted to ask too.
No, so this is really funny. I feel like right now the thing that's holding it up is so it's a combo. So there is a little bit of a rise because you have the Fae because of Book Talk. So you have Fae paranormal being kind of big, but only in a certain shape and frame.
Yeah.
I think that in general, the thing that's holding up the paranormal wave is the creature, the magic. I think that we had our vampire and shifter, vampire going into shifter thing. And that was this powerhouse that came out. And I definitely see this. It's not going to be vampires and shifters again. That's not what people want. And for a while, I was is it going to be witches? Is it going to be mermaids? Is it going to be aliens? But it seems like there's not a consensus the way there was with vampires and shifters. It doesn't seem like there's an audience agreement on where the direction for paranormal, the next big paranormal move should happen. Yeah. And that's the deciding factor right now. And that's why it hasn't happened in the way that maybe we've seen after other similar, after a recession, paranormal becomes really popular. But we're there's a recession, but we haven't agreed on yet what the next paranormal arena is going to be. So I think we're waiting. I don't know. I literally on a weekly basis am talking about this very subject. I'm what is it going to be? It's witches really seemed like they were I really felt like witches were going to be the next the next thing. And so I feel like that there's a chance, but then also watching trends, that does seem to be plateauing in a way where they're I'm not seeing the same crop of books coming out, the same numbers and the same kind of publishers are buying this one, but there are still there. So witches, I think, are at the front of the line right now. I don't know though that like nobody's jumped out ahead of the pack yet. And until that happens, we won't have the surge, I don't think.
Yeah. I think that in the traditional publishing world, it feels very paranormal rom-com. There's not a ton, but what we get is like paranormal romantic comedies, which is it's really fun. In the indie world, I have this conversation a lot, like, is monster romance the new paranormal? But like you and Aaron, I'm just kind of sitting back like, when is it going to happen? But we had the opportunity to talk with an old Nocturne author, Michelle Hoff, and one thing she shared that I wholeheartedly am like, okay, don't ruin this the next time it happens, is she's like, it became overly saturated. She's like, there was just too much. And I'm like, if we get another paranormal movement, I know everybody's going to be excited, but let's not ruin it by having too much of it.
No, and like actually that I think is like that's the wave, as you see, like you can tell when with anything when you hit a certain saturation, and you're like, there are so many books on this week's on sale list that are in this category that we are just about to see the wave break, because it's like you said, it's just too much to choose from. It's too much to try to navigate and swim through. And so you then readers tend to go to something that's a little easier for them to just grab their book on.
Yeah. Okay, it's so cool that you're a bookseller. We could talk books all day. Let's talk about your book some more, okay? So Aaron bought up His Bride with Two Royal Secrets. It's a marriage of convenience romance with a pack that includes no love, no passion, and no heirs. And I just have to say, the fact that it kicks off literally like in a car garage, I was like, I don't think I've ever read this in a romance novel, and I loved it. We would love to hear just about your experience of writing Jag and Rita's book.
So we knew when we were working on the continuity premise, you kind of come up with like some of the points that will be your anchors. So one of them was that all these brides we knew would be unsuitable brides. So it was so funny because we were like, okay, what we're texting in our group text, and it's like, what's yours going to be? And I just knew, I was like, mine's going to be a mechanic. I just knew it. I was like, I want a mechanic princess, because this is also this like we knew they would be royal too. So we were like, they're royal, but they're also unsuitable. Like, what can we make? How can we, like, what unsuitable princesses do we have? And a mechanic came to me immediately. I love cars, and I have this, before I mentioned earlier that I had left my career path. So my career path is in natural resource management. And so I love cars, but I love the earth a lot more. And so I have this personal conflict, because the way that cars were in my life, it was this thing. So my family background is really, really diverse. So I have a lot of different cultural influences. But interestingly, cars were this thing that was a similar, there was a similar love for cars in all of my different family lines. So it was something where my mom's dad would take me to go on drives, and my dad's stepmom would take me to concept car shows, and then my dad and I would go to the car exhibit, like the classic car exhibits at the art museum, or just these different things that I was doing with all these different parts of myself that were not usually connected. And so there's a sentimental love I have for it, but I also have this huge conflict, because I just know that we just shouldn't be driving cars. And so and then that's this tension. So one of the things that's really fun to do as an author is to write a better world, or write the world that you want to see. And so I knew, I wanted to try to use the idea of a mechanic to bridge these things and to write the better world. And so I even before Rita came to be, I had this private dream of getting a classic car, because I just love these classic cars, and then having a conversion project and converted to electric. And so when we were coming up with our unsuitable princesses, and the mechanic just came to me right away, I knew too that it would be my chance to play with this idea of making better cars. and that's how Rita came to be. Is this she gets to be the genius, and she gets to be the person who who knows how to do it, even though I don't know how to do it. I am not an engineer and I am not a mechanic. And so she got to be that. And so I got to be like, okay, well, like I have my mechanic. And then I knew too, then we also picked our heroes. So we knew that who was going to have what kind of hero. And so, and this is an interesting thing. It's like, the car blending became the bridge, because just one of the things that I actually find really fascinating. And so the setting is a fictional emirate, but it is based on the UAE. And so knowing that, like, when they visit and she mentions the cars that the police have, like she's mentioning the real cars that in the UAE the police fleets are. So there's just this passion for luxury cars that exist over there, and that really came to work well as the bridge. And so having her be this mechanic, she's smart and she's gritty. She's like my classic Joanna Lindsay. She's a woman in a man's field. She's doing all these things. And again, really pulling to Joanna Lindsay, one of my favorite books of hers is called Man of My Dreams. And it's a historical with a duke, and the heroine is obsessed with horses. She's like loves horses, and the duke is as well. And there's a scene where he overhears her talking to his horse, and she's just like, it's very sensual, and he wakes up to this like sensual dialogue happening, thinking something else is happening, and he goes to catch her, and she's in there just stroking his horse.
Yeah.
And so I love that scene. And when I came to this, and I'm like, my mechanic, it's horsepower, it's this. And I actually based the scene of him walking in to seeing her caressing the car.
The Ferrari.
In the scene. And that's actually the inspiration for that, is like my homage to Joanna in this book was the opening scene where she is stroking the car and he just walks in. And actually, interestingly, that was always supposed to be the opening scene, but I did not have that as the opening scene of the first round. So initially I had opened with a scene with the prince to introduce him in a different way. And then the feedback was quickly like, this is really where the story starts. Wow. This is the moment. This is where it happens. And so that all like came into that. And then so we open in our garage with our spinning Ferrari. So
oh, this is great. This has been such a great conversation.
I know.
Well, as readers, when reading a marriage of convenience romance, the why behind it is important, along with what's in it for the characters, which you capture both so well with Rita and Jag. What advice would you give an aspiring author who is trying their hand at writing this trope?
So this is a thing that guides me a lot as a writer, and that is that first drafts are fertilizer, or if I'm feeling less polite, I say a different word instead of fertilizer. But so just that is a thing. This book actually had a lot of revision because of those two, like those specific things, is really strengthening that. It really took a lot of work to make sure to dig into the characters enough to really get why they would both agree to something so outrageous. Like why would someone who's otherwise brilliant but also traditional agree to this crazy idea? And why would somebody who is so powerful agree or even put forth the idea of marriage when it wasn't necessarily required? Why would those two things happen? And so I knew that they did happen, but uncovering the whys did take time, and it took people asking like, well, why did they do that? And then you really got to go back to character and kind of dig into what's motivating them and what you know about them. And that's what we did with this book, is we just kept going back. And if it was when it didn't feel strong enough, I went back and dug further in. And what was really interesting, I think Jag was the hardest, actually. Jag was the hardest to get in there because the thing that came to me like at the end for Jag was how dedicated he was to his people and to being a good ruler, and how that played in, because we started knowing that they had made this pact to find unsuitable brides, that they had done this, but then what all of those agreements, what not they tied him in I didn't understand the not fully until I realized that he also didn't want anything that he did to negatively impact the people that his life was really supposed to be on behalf of and for, because he knew and was so aware of, and related to his core wound is that he would not, like, he knows his people love him, and he's been hurt with love before and is aware of it. So he's actually, despite the shields and guards he puts up, he is actually very sensitive to the power of love and very responsible to it. And so he, until I really realized that he was all these things, he is powerful and he's aware of his power. So why doesn't he use it carelessly? Well, it's because he cares about people, because he cares about how his choices and decisions affect the common people of his country. And once that really came in, that allowed it to be kind of like, okay, well, if that's true, as well as these things, what position does that put him in? And then that, answering that question became the answer to the why and what's in it, because he suddenly, in meeting Rita, had an answer that didn't hurt his people, where he could do what he had said he would do, but it wasn't going to hurt the people that he cared about, and the people that he cared about, in this case, being his people of his nation. And with her, I knew early on, I knew very early on that she was estranged from her parents, and that her estrangement, the way that her estrangement affected her was like that, in a way, like similar to Jag, where she has a deep respect for the institutions of family, but then also had been very deeply hurt by family. And that her reaction to being hurt was to try to like withdraw and shield herself, and literally withdraw from the world, to have no one know who she is and no one know. And that to kind of, and say that, like, then when I get offered this opportunity that doesn't ask me to re-engage, like that, like where, but speaks to something that I long for anyways, because that is a deep longing that never went away, even though it was thwarted. And so that gets you to oh, okay, that's why she would agree to this. That's why he would agree to this. That's why he would suggest it in the first place, rather than just going with a for sure, come along, or this X, Y, and Z. Like really getting into how their wounds, how their motivations, their drives, their loves, and how their way of thinking in being the fact that most people are protective, and most people will try to kind of help cushion themselves from the world, like how that urge to cushion yourself impacts the way you look at things and make decisions. And that was really like unpacking all of that with these two characters was really how we got to like, oh, this does actually work. It doesn't seem weird that this innocent woman would actually do this, because she covered her bases, and she kind of is like, oh, this actually works for me. And that this man who can have anything would actually put himself in the vulnerable position of asking a stranger to be his wife, because it actually works for him with all of the other urges and motivations and conflicts that he has.
One thing that Aaron and I talk about all the time is the Presents hero. So can you share with us what you think makes the Presents hero special, and how you go about writing them?
So it was really interesting. It's coming in print. So I, again, going back to Joanna Lindsay, she writes an alpha hero. She does not write, like, all of her heroes are alpha heroes. And because as that's been a thing I've been a fan of, I was always like, I didn't always even have the words to say it. I was like, I know there is a thing that is fine about an alpha hero, but I also know that, because again, like I was coming into writing romance at a time when romance was really being put under a much larger microscope than it had been, like and larger because wider groups of people were paying attention to it than had for a long time. But then also just like this, there's a lot of discussion of alpha holes and all these things, and things that were like criticisms and things that were raised that were valid. And then you're kind of, as a fan, in that position of, you're like, okay, is the thing that I like, is it a problem that I like it? Is there, do I need to kind of evolve, and usually it's and what is we're salvaging, and what is it that I'm responding to that is good? And so again, through Romance Book Club, we had all these conversations about an alpha hero. One of the things that we were finding was that alpha heroes tended to resonate more with the whole club than not. But there was a distinct, like, this guy I don't like at all versus this guy
Yeah.
just we all like. So it was really kind of picking apart what is it that's great and what is it that can be tossed away. And Jackie Ashenden has written a lot about heroes and alpha heroes, and she's really identified a lot of the little details that are what makes it great and okay versus what is not part of it. And one of the things that she's said in the past that I found really powerful was she said an alpha hero is still a hero. Like, he still is like functionally the hero of the story. And when we, to pull it back even, when do we use the word hero? When we talk about a superhero, we talk about these like, what is a hero? What does a hero do? And a hero takes actions to non-harm other people, even when they often are doing so in an abrasive, gruff, even rude way. Like, their actions are motivated not because they're just seeking pleasure. They're not seeking pleasure. They're not seeking gain. They're not seeking aggrandizement in their actions. And they are seeking usually responsibility, or if they're not a responsible hero, to kind of, so just like to hide, to like, they're reacting to wounds. They're not out there looking to hurt people. So that's one thing, is a presents hero is not, because a presents hero is often very wealthy. A presents hero is not the wealthy person who's out getting their wealth because they're taking advantage or being extractive. A presents hero, like, so these types of elements of remembering that despite the fact that they might be wealthy, that they might be incredibly rude or out of control, that what's motivating them is not an ill, because they're not a villain. They're not actually a villain. So making sure to remember that whatever drives them has to be noble. Like, it actually has to be a thing we would align with a hero, not with someone who we would align with someone who is taking advantage. And they at the same time, they do need to be like really powerful. But then you ask the question, what is power? Like, are they powerful because they're wealthy? No, they can't be, because it's not actually wealth that makes them a hero. It's their motivations and their self-control and confidence in self. So the hero that is really autocratic and makes choices for people without consulting them, he doesn't do it because he likes power. He does it because he knows what's best, which is the thing that the heroine often will teach him, that maybe he doesn't know what's best for everybody. He does have to listen. He can take all that power and strength and still direct it in a way that doesn't step over people. And so you have to have underneath, like, he can start out walking all over people, but you have to have the motivation that's underneath that, not be a motivation that is about overwhelming or exercising his power in a way to control others, even if he is controlling others, even if this is the practical reality that's happening. The reason he's doing it has to be rooted in a noble and heroic idea. And I think that is a big part of writing a presents hero, because presents heroes, like, they do not get, like, you don't, like, we've had times where I've been like, oh, he does this, and had the editor come back and be like, that's not very alpha-y. Like, we got to do something different there. Like, they have to be that kind of strong, commanding, that force, but also that force can't be mean. Like, that force can't be coming from meanness, can't be coming from domineeringness, it can't be coming from a place that is not heroic. And I think too, keeping in mind like what that power and force is doing for the people around them, and especially for the heroine. So one of the things we would talk a lot about in book club is that a lot of people who read romance are very decisive in their lives. Like, they make choices, they are in charge of things, they are busy, they are organized, they are willing to work hard. And part of what that hero is someone who's not going to come to them and ask them to do more of that. Like, is not going to come and be like, can you tell me where you want to eat for dinner?
Yeah.
Like, no. You are flying me to the restaurant you picked out because I'm hungry. like it's like that kind of thing. Like, we're not going to have the back and forth of what do you want? What do you want? Like, because the part of the fantasy is not having to do
Not
all
having
those
to,
things that
yeah.
you do in your life, and not having to be in charge, and not having. So you want, like, that strength has to be there, or he doesn't satisfy a present reader.
Well, I love that you said that, because I read yours and I'm thinking of Jag, and then Aaron and I have been reading Lila Mae White's debut, and I think of Akeem, and in both instances, it's this duty that's really driving them. Like in Jag's case, it's some revenge, which is just incredible, but it's still duty to people, and it's an image that they want their people to see them having. And it's a lot about respect. Like, I want my people to respect me. I do want to present myself as a good leader to them, and the heroine is just like a wonderful part of that package for them. But yeah, so much of it is it's not harming anybody. It really is like, I want my people to believe that, like, I have their best interest in mind. And they also just happen to have all this money.
Yeah. And it's so, and that's actually a funny thing. So one of one of the criticisms that comes up about Presents is the glamorization of incredible wealth and all of that. And so I think that that's a useful criticism, and that also it can drive us to writing more of the world we want. So one of the things that I love about them having all this money is that money can do things. Yes. And so I make them do things with their money. They use their money to better the world around them. And like, that's a fun thing, because I would wish for the people who have the money to do it, to do that with their money. Yeah. And you write the world you want to see.
I'm sorry, but as a reader of them, that part of the fantasy is always incredible. I would love a prince to just swoop in with a ton of money,
It's a swoop. It's always a swoop too. Just
or kidnapping.
Yeah. Oh no, you kidnapped me and are taking me to the palace. It's awful.
Oh, darn.
Well, Aaron, do you want to kick us out with some round out questions?
Yeah, of course. So what time of day do you prefer to write?
Oh gosh. So I don't really have much. I don't have as much control over my writing schedule as I would like. And that's mainly because I have little kids. So I do have an 8-year-old, but that's my oldest. And the other two are just like, they kind of guide the schedule. So in an ideal world, I would honestly, I would love to wake up and write from 8 to 5. Like, I would write all day long and just sit and write. My kids do not let that happen though. And so I tend to end up with my husband and I, we end up having to kind of split the day in a way. So if he's working in the morning, I'll work in the afternoon. If I'm working in the morning, he works in the afternoon. So I write, and then after bedtime is like a universal kind of work time for us too. So I tend to write probably the most consistently actually late at night after bedtime. But then I also write during the day. And so it's either in the morning or in the afternoon or all day if I'm on a deadline, and we just all really adjust. But it's just kind of all over the place, adjusting to wherever you can find those minutes to get it done.
Yeah. So going with that, do you have daily writing goals or no?
So I do have daily writing goals. I set them based on what I'm working on. So if I'm working on a Presents and I don't have another thing down the pipeline or coming up really quick, I will set them. They'll be a lot lower writing goals, because the Presents, the final total is a novella versus a full length. And so if I'm writing a Presents, I will usually set myself a pretty modest goal of like 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. But if I'm writing a full length novel, it's more like 2,000 to 4 normally. But then what often happens is, because I'll miss days or I'll have things come up, usually kid things, then I will end up with days where I have to catch up. So I will, on a catch up day, is 5,000 to 8,000.
Holy smokes.
I gotta write a lot today. So
I'm gonna go have a glass of wine for you for that day.
No, it's incredible. You're like, I am drained. I pulled it all out today.
Well, last and next, what was one of the books you finished recently, and what's a book you hope to pick up next?
So I am on a decolonization reading kick right now. And so the book that I just finished was called Detours, and it's a decolonial guide to Hawaii. And I really, in wanting to read that, I wanted to read it to be here in a better way and to kind of understand. And it was brilliant. It's really, really good. It's written by not only Indigenous authors, like Indigenous Kanaka, but also people who have been settlers here for a long time from various backgrounds. And Hawaii has got quite a lot of people. So it was really good. And then I am also reading Book Lovers. So Book Lovers is just, I'm loving it right now. It's fun. It's part of that crop of books about bookstores.
I'm reading
right
it
now.
too. I was thinking that when you said bookstore books, I'm like, oh, I'm reading Book Lovers right now.
Yeah, Book Lovers is later, and Buy the Book too is out too. So I'm excited about that when I'm done with Book Lovers. But then I'm also reading Braiding Sweetgrass. So that's what I'm in the middle of right now.
So we love, and this says a lot about us, but we love a kidnapping aspect in a story, especially in a present. So what did you enjoy about writing the kidnapping part in Stolen to Wear His Crown?
So a lot of it's about the control. There's like, oh, I can't help it. That's a part I love. So, and actually going back to what my aunt had said about romance long ago, she was like, if a vampire mesmerizes you and you have this wonderful passionate experience, but you were mesmerized, so you don't have to deal with society's like you're a bad woman for this kind of thing. That's what I love about a kidnapping. It's a kidnapping, and again, romance readers often are really, really in control. Like they're in control of their lives, they're in control of other people's lives, they're in control, they have to make all the decisions. And I love that a kidnapping relieves you of that. A kidnapping takes all your responsibilities and forces you to set them down. You can't worry about if you had to go to the grocery store, if you got swept away to a luxurious exotic location. And I think I like that a lot. I really, really love in a kidnapping and in the you are forcibly removed from your everyday life, but forcibly removed from the way you were stuck in your everyday life. So Mina was so stuck in her life because by the point that we meet her at, she is so taken in that I must operate within all these parameters or I will fail. And I just believe that wholeheartedly. And I let that impact everything that I do. I let that impact the way I dress. I let that impact the way I present myself, the way I speak. And on her own, she would never have gotten out of that rut herself. She would never have learned the lesson. So you need an outside force to come in and take her out of it and force her to look at herself and ask the question, are you being fully yourself? Are you living your fully realized existence? And if you're not, you're going to have to do something different. And the kidnapping is really a great mechanism for that. It literally takes her away physically, just out of everything is not in her control anymore, and puts her in so many uncomfortable positions, but that force her to speak up for herself, that force her to do it. But every time, because she actually gets ambushed a number of times in the book. So she gets ambushed by the SWAT team. She gets ambushed by the beauty team. She gets ambushed she's always getting ambushed. And in that, every time she comes out better because the ambush forces her to get out of her really stuck idea that is holding her back. And I think a kidnapping is such a great mechanism for that.
That was the most beautiful, most intelligent way that I've ever heard that explained. And we already loved it, but now I'm like, oh yeah, give us more kidnapping.
Actually, we're joking because the current one I'm working on, I was like, and the light kidnapping element of it. And my editor is just like, I love a light kidnapping.
Aaron loved an over-the-shoulder kidnapping.
Yes, yeah. If you do an over-the-shoulder carry, that's extra points.
oh gosh, that's my favorite. For Joanna's quite good at the over-the-shoulder kidnapping.
Well, what is one of your favorite romance tropes to read?
Oh goodness. So I I love enemies to lovers, which is, I feel like, too broad. Like, because you can do enemies to lovers can be any kind of thing. So, in addition to enemies to lovers, I really, oh gosh, I love so many things. I really love enemies to lovers that also includes somebody keeping a secret identity. So, like, I am the princess, but I'm not letting you know because I don't want you to know I'm the princess because it'll change the way you treat me. Or I am the king, but I am. My next idea is I got a bounty hunter who's a count masquerading as a bounty hunter kind of thing. Like I like that secret identity. Enemies to lovers and secret identities are huge for me. Really, really huge for me. I really also like forced proximity. I think that forced proximity is really great. And that, again, a kidnapping really gives you that. Well,
I mean, tell us you're a Presents author without telling us
I also really love one bed.
Again, tell us you're a Presents author.
Like, oh no, there's one bed. Like, nobody can sleep on the floor.
How dare you break out the air mattress?
No, ew.
A futon? Okay, so tell us one hill that you will wholeheartedly die on.
Oh my gosh. So I am not a fan of pandas. And I don't like pandas. I don't like the amount of conservation attention they get. I don't like that all the pandas you see in the world are rented. Like, I don't like that. I'm not a fan of pandas. I joke, but I also am like, I don't think we spend so much time trying to save pandas, and I actually think pandas are actively trying to leave us. I don't think they want to live in a world with us. I think pandas are conscientious objectors to the world at large, and so they're trying to conscientiously object, and we're just like pouring all these resources on them. So I'm like, no
it's
pandas.
That human guilt of like, we can't let this thing go, but we kind of probably screwed it up for them ourselves.
No, exactly. And it's not that uncommon in conservation circles because people get really jealous about the fact that pandas get so much funding. I'm like, what about the salmon? People are like, we don't want your fish, okay? So pandas, I'm not here for them. That's the hill. People are like, but what up? No.
No pandas. Okay.
No pandas. No, and then so of course everyone knows that, and so they always give me panda gifts or like panda things. We know you love pandas so much. I'm like, don't need that.
Well, if you decide you want takeout for dinner, where do you order from and what do you order?
So I live kind of out of town. So I actually getting into town is a little bit of an ordeal. So normally I'm like, oh, what's my favorite food? I think that, but that's not really like, I can't really do that. But there is one place that is so in a little kind of tiny town by the 7-Eleven called the Curtistown Cafe. And I love to go there because it's this small cafe in a rural area on Big Island of Hawaii, very, very, very remote place. And I walked in the first time and they have books for sale. I don't know where they got all these books. They have so many presents. They specifically have shelves and shelves of presents for sale. And I walked in and I was like, wait, what? I was like, I thought I was getting a burger, but you have all these books for sale and I write for these books. So I love to support the Curtistown Cafe. So if I was getting takeout, I'm like, I'm going to get a platelet from the Curtistown Cafe today. I love to support them because they are just out here supporting all of us category writers.
That is so dope.
Yeah, big shout out to them. That's awesome.
So next time you go, you have to take a picture and tag us.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I know.
We love catching category in the wild. So.
Oh yeah, no, and it was so unexpected. It was just not what you expected when you walked in there. So I will love to. I'll do it next time I go.
Presents in burgers, like what? Okay, tell us one of the toughest pieces of advice you've ever received.
So mostly, I, like, as I mentioned, I really believe in revision. So mostly I don't find advice to be tough. I find it to be like inspiring and helpful and great.
Yeah.
But I moved around a lot when I was in elementary school. And for some reason, I always missed daily oral language. So I would go to one school and they had just finished it. I would get to one school and they hadn't started, but then I'd leave before they started it. So I actually really, really missed a lot of the fundamental grammar education that I probably should have had. And so my writing is sometimes it reflects that. It reflects that in ways that I can't really necessarily always recognize myself because I genuinely don't know the thing. And so there's been advice where I've had a few times where people are like, you need to clean this up. It is sloppy. And that's the toughest advice because it's that it touches on sensitivity, like a thing I'm sensitive about and also don't really know that well. And so it's hard for me to fix it. And it's like, I get embarrassed and like hot faced and everything. But even that advice, even when that's hard, like it always makes it better. And so I kind of come back around ultimately always to the first drafts or fertilizer, and it doesn't have to be perfect and you can come back and fix it. And even if it's hard for you, you can fix it and just kind of going back at that and getting back to that. And I think even it's also kind of a good thing too, because it kind of is a reminder that like, yes, it does matter that your work is readable, is legible, but you, even something so fundamental as like not always having the best handle on grammar can be overcome if you have a dream and if you have a story.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your writing career?
Write shorter sentences. So my teachers kept saying to me, think Hemingway. And I did not know what that meant. Like I had no idea what that meant. So for years, I'm like, well, I'm not going to write about old men fishing, and I'm not going to, like, I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know what you mean by that. And finally, much later in life, I finally learned and realized that what they meant was that the things that were strong about my writing that were Hemingway-esque were things like repetition or kind of a frankness about things, but that I needed to be using shorter sentences a la Hemingway because that frankness was getting lost in complicated sentences. Okay. And so I would say write shorter sentences, and so I would understand earlier.
I understand now why the Hemingway app is always telling me my sentence is too long. So.
No, it's like write shorter sentence. You're like, oh, I get it.
This has been the best, most random answered. Write shorter sentences. Pandas are a no. One day, Caitlin Cruz and Maisie Yates walked into the bookstore. Like, I love when these take us by surprise. So lastly, where can everyone follow you online?
So I am on Instagram and on TikTok. TikTok's kind of random, so just be ready. It's random. But I think that's what TikTok
I don't think we'd expect anything different.
I told you, contents may surprise you.
Well, that's great to know that you're on TikTok, because I've been trying to figure out how to feature you on my vlogging project. And I tweet out, as I'm reading through the book, and you don't have a Twitter. And I'm like, well, how am I going to do this?
You found her.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll just
TikTok.
Do it through TikTok this time. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us on a random Tuesday in June. You've totally just been so awesome.
Thank you so much. It's the first day of summer, and it's just such a great time and a great time to talk to you guys. I follow you guys, so I'm like, hopefully someday I can be on. I would love to be on. So thank you so much.
Well, listeners, make sure you check the show notes. We will have all the places where you can keep up with the incredible Marcella Bell. We cannot wait for more books from you. And Erin and I will chat with you in our next episode.